All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of A Sip of Knowledge with Marty Duffy, Liz Rhoades, and Lew Bryson, plus this week's special guests, which is themselves for the first time ever. You're going to get to hear all about your hosts and their backgrounds, their secrets, all that stuff I'm sure they'll get into very soon. Real quick before I turn things over, I'm Will Hookinga from Zavvy.co. As always, just want to help you get your bearings as you settle in here. So on your right, you'll see a chat box. Please say hello. Let us know where you're joining us from around the world. If you have a question for Liz, Lew, or Marty throughout the show, just hit the little button that says ask a question at the bottom of your screen. Put in your question there. I'll be keeping an eye out for those throughout the show. And last but not least, feel free to invite your friends to join us. There's a share button at the top that makes it easy to do that. But yeah, with all that said, Marty, Lew, Liz, I'll turn things over to you now so you can interview yourselves.
Thanks there, Will. And remember what Atticus Finch said in To Kill a Mockingbird. You never really understand a person until you consider things from his point of view, until you climb into his skin and walk around in it, like Ed Gein or Leatherface from Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Remember that.
Direct quote.
This got dark very quick.
That was my Gregory Peck. I'm considered the Gregory Peck of Crystal Glassware, just so you know.
And who else would be?
Yeah.
That's a fair question.
Yeah, exactly. Very good. Thanks, I think. Well, yeah. Anyways, hi, everyone. It's a Sip of Knowledge. This is a little special episode because, the three of us, even though we get together every week, we don't really get to see each other once in a while. Little Lizard and I got to see each other last week at the American Distilling Institute conference.
You did actually see each other, right? You didn't just
we did.
Oh, okay, good. Yeah, that's great.
Oh, we actually,
it was nice.
Liz would come by and saunter. She'd always saunter around the. she walks a lot like Jessica Rabbit from Who Shot.
Oh my God!
She would. She'd saunter. She wore this long.
So a lot of motion, not much movement.
Is her hair going over one side of her face? Yes, saunter. But
very warm to be doing all that in Louisville in August.
Well,
ain't it always?
You could have been ready to pass out. I confused it. You could have just been wobbling. Oh my God. But we all live very far away from each other. At least, well, you two kind of live kind of close. A state apart.
Yeah, it's still like an hour and a half.
Yeah, there you go. I'm 8.
Yeah, you're
by car. Just a few hours if I want to actually fly, use my superpowers. But anyways, we thought this would be a good opportunity, not only for us to get to know each other a little better, but for all you kids, get to know us a little better. We have had some really wonderful folks who have been very loyal viewers. Plus, at the show last week, a big shout out to all the ADI folks who came up and complimented us on the show. There was quite a number. Nice. I had about at least 5 or 6 people come up, say, "Hey, man, I love your show. See me watching." I go, "Really? You're the guy? You're the one watching it? Wow, thanks."
Hey, man.
So we're just gonna do this kind of open forum thing where we interview each other, ask each other questions about their jobs, and other things, and maybe their likes, dislikes. And I think we should start off with young Lizard.
Actually, before we start.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
No. I just wanted to get in what I'm drinking, which is what I always. This is the Davies County limited edition finished in Cabernet Sauvignon cask.
That's a beautiful bottle. I like that.
It is a nice bottle, isn't it?
It's a nice label, beautiful color on the whiskey.
Nice color. Yeah,
very reddish.
Spilled it on my keyboard.
Yeah, your keyboard will thank you for it. Every other word, there'll be a little hiccup on the page. Little
wow,
Lizard,
yeah.
I used to run into you at events and a lot of times in airports. I was always running into you at like O'Hare because we'd You'll be going to the same show or
Yeah.
different shows, a lot of traveling. But what now? You've been at this 10 years, but what were you doing prior to that? Did you come right out of school and get a job?
Yeah,
with
can we go?
DIAGEO?
Because I actually wanted to go back
Even further?
Well, no, kind of in that. I guess when did you start focusing on STEM in general, and then in particular where you are, what you're in now? Could you walk us through that? I mean, it's not just education; it's it's decision making.
The decision making process, yeah. So I'll start with something I think I've said a few times on the show before, and certainly yesterday on Facebook. But I'm a self-proclaimed right brain scientist, and what I define this as is what I'm driven by is creativity, curiosity, and entrepreneurial spirit, and then fall back on my technical chops to execute that vision. So essentially, on my maternal side, very creative people, music. My grandpa on my maternal side actually used to do some lounge singing back in the day in Chicago. So I get that creative side from, the maternal side, but my paternal side, both my dad and grandpa are chemists. So I sort of, right.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I sort of kind of fuse the two together, and again, kind of refer to myself as a right brain scientist. So when I was thinking about what am I going to do with my life, here I am, 14. What am I going to do with my life? I just thought that food really was a good fusion of both of those things, right? Science you can eat, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or drink in this case.
Or drink.
That, but I also was, alongside of that, really inspired by Alton Brown.
Oh, okay.
I love
that guy.
Yellow Brick Road. Yellow Brick Road was fantastic.
The Alton Brown Dirt Cowboy?
Sure. So early on in kind of high school, I really decided that that's what I wanted to go into, food science, just because I thought it was a good merriment between, technical and, very applicable to society. Food is also very creative. So I just kind of decided that was what I was going to do. So that whole thing was going really well until about my junior year. I had a food product development class first semester, and the whole semester was about creating a product and marketing it, concept to basically commercialization. And for whatever reason, I decided to make a beer. So I say I've been in the industry for about 10 years, but actually it's 14 that I've been starting this October, that I've actually been either researching academically or professionally in the industry. So that semester I created my first beer in an academic setting, and I loved it. I was really just infatuated by the biochemistry behind it, and also just, the social application of it. Created my first sensory panel. Of course, they all had to be 21 or over. That was the stipulation. I was not 21, but that's beside the point. I would actually like to say that Lew, maybe you're aware of this, but there's actually legislation that 18 or over, you can actually make beer, you just can't consume it.
Pennsylvania, you're allowed to own a bar, but you can't drink in it.
Yeah.
At 18.
I didn't make the rules. I'm just playing in the sandbox here.
Living in that crazy world.
Yeah, so that's essentially how I got, bit by the brewing bug. And, again, it's just was something that I was really excited about. I didn't know very much about it before, but just kind of applying the food science bits into brewing was super fascinating to me. So I just kind of kept going with it.
So Liz, you did, during those early years, did you intern or did you work at a, fill in, or you work at a smaller distillery? Or did eventually, like I said, as I asked previously, did you go right from school into DIAGEO? And did DIAGEO have some kind of program where they helped?
Yeah, DIAGEO does have a program. For sure they do. I wasn't a part of it. So like I mentioned, yeah. So junior year, I kind of got bit by the brewing bug. I did some independent research my senior year in undergrad as well with brewing. And then from there, I went to grad school at North Carolina State. And so I got into the fermentation program. Because again, like I mentioned, I was like, this is really cool. I want to continue to grow and learn. So worked in the beer and wine lab in grad school, did my master's work in beer as well. But to your point, your question, I did work at a small craft brewery in Raleigh, North Carolina.
Oh, wow.
While I was in grad school. And it was super exciting. Again, like I recommend to anyone. So I started out as an unpaid brewing intern, which I would highly recommend to anyone. You asked if DIAGEO had an internship program. They do. But I really enjoyed my program that I was involved in, just because it's a craft brewery, super small. Got to see and be involved in a lot of different unit operations. Everything from brewing to bottling. I actually tended bar and poured beer Friday nights and modeled some T-shirts. So got the full experience.
Wow.
Yeah, you did.
So, but I liked that approach just because I got to see a lot of different facets of the industry besides just, science, right? So
Yeah.
But right out of grad school, I did start at DIAGEO, and again, didn't have an internship. I just saw the job online and applied, old school style.
Wow. I mean, it just seems like
what was the job?
My first 6 months, I was a liquid commercialization specialist.
Wait a minute.
You applied for that?
What the hell is that?
So in innovation, but so just for those who aren't.
Because honestly, that sounds like the T-shirt job.
The T-shirt job?
Yeah, I mean.
What kind of T-shirts do you wear exactly? How does that sound like a T-shirt job?
No, so for those who aren't familiar with the innovation process, there's actually several different stages. And so from concept to commercialization, right? So here's an idea, and then here's product at the distributor, like ready for someone to sell. And there's various different points in the process. So the commercialization bit is sort of the liquid. I'm sorry, Lou, I'm going to say liquid in this scenario.
It's already in the name of the job. You can't get away from it.
The liquid has, gone through prototyping. We've aligned to a certain, liquid. It meets claims, etc. And then there's the whole, okay, now we need to go produce it, right? And so that half of the scale is basically what that job focused on. So my very first project actually at DIAGEO was Harp Shandy.
Oh, really?
Wait, what shandy?
Harp Shandy.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
Yeah.
Not a small product.
So it's super exciting because it was a beer. And so I felt like it was right place, right time, right talent. And I was really excited. So my first first business trip at DIAGEO was up to Canada. And the plant manager of that brewery actually had a luge in his backyard. I'll say backyard, but it was Canada and it was February.
Does that kind of,
my first business trip at DIAGEO, I got to go snowmobiling and luging. And someone was like, "Was this your first business trip?" And I was like, "Yeah." And they're like, "Yeah, don't expect this." So it was super, it was just like one of those, super great story moments. But lo and behold, right, Lou, you know this, there wasn't a lot of beer making in DIAGEO North America at the time. So I kind of quickly had to shift gears and learn about distilling. So, and then when I did, I was like, this is awesome. So kind of the evolution, and I like to refer to as distilling as the beer afterlife.
Oh, nice.
And so the rest is history.
Okay.
So that's a little quick rundown.
Can I do a follow-up here?
Sure.
Because that was actually my next question was, when we do the intro every week, you list off what kind of booze you have made, but you always announce that your favorite is whiskey. How did that happen, and why is it your favorite? Is it because it's more fun or more interesting, or you like to drink it more, or? Yeah,
that's a good question. I think it is because I have that brewing background, and I enjoy the biochemistry, like I mentioned, behind, the brewing process, brewing and fermentation process with grain-based products. So I think that's probably why I've gravitated towards it more, just quite simply because it's more interesting to me, and because I have that brewing background. And I think there's cereals, right? If you think about the broad spectrum of cereals, there's a lot going on, right? And I know there's certainly a lot going on in the cane-based space, but from my experience, not as diverse. So I feel like there's a lot of different levers for flavor as well. So whiskey, if you look at, grain to glass, there's just so many things happening, and that's exciting.
Liz, do you recall which whiskey was the one, that really kind of grabbed you, that really kind of drew you in? Was there a special whiskey?
I don't know if I have a certain one that, in terms of like what solidified
at the time, just one that you go, oh my God, I've been drinking whiskey. I've had whiskey, but this whiskey is making me think, oh my God, I want to work with whiskey, kind of thing.
So I have sort of like an embarrassing whiskey moment, and this kind of dovetails into the question. So had been, making whiskey for a while. And my boyfriend, actually, who's not in distilling, he's a brewer. He actually introduced me to whiskey, and he's like, "Oh, you got to try this whiskey." And I was like, whatever, you're a brewer. Like, Scott, like, you don't know whiskey. But he, introduced me to it, and I was like, wow, this is really good. And I felt sort of like embarrassed that I didn't know about the whiskey, but it's Michter's Rye.
Oh,
so good.
There.
Yeah, and he throws it in my face all the time.
What about a DIAGEO whiskey? Was there a DIAGEO whiskey that you liked? Even the ones you didn't get to work with. I'm assuming you didn't get to work with any of the scotches much. You were mostly North American, yeah?
Yeah, pretty much North American. I will say one that did catch me off guard, Singleton.
Oh.
I launched that baby.
Did you?
Whoa.
Maybe that's why.
That's why. They only
Destiny.
launched in Illinois and New Jersey initially. And hello, Marty. Boom. Exploded. And then I went away for a couple of years and things fell apart without me.
So that's a good segue. let's do the same thing on you here.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we kind of get like, oh, well, Marty Duffy, I was born, and then I became a senior master of whiskey.
That's basically it. That's
okay. There's some kind of shit in between there.
Well, I started off. What did I start doing? I was in theater for many years. I did improv in the 80s, and I did classes at Second City, and I starred with I performed with two very prominent names. One is Dick Costello, who went on to invent Twitter.
Wow.
Does he return my calls now? No, he doesn't. And then the other one was Steve Carell. We performed together for about a year in a group. And then I went to
calls?
Huh? What?
Does he return your calls?
You
don't call him.
You don't recall my name.
Oh.
So, hey, Steve, it's me, Marty. Marty who? That's it. Oh, Hollywood goodbye. And then I went to Columbia College to try to get into regular theater and performed with other ne'er-do-wells, guys like Andy Dick and Dino Stamatopoulos and Scott Adsit, all people who are, Midland famous. But it was funny, supporting my acting habit was no easy job. So
you were probably doing hundreds of lines a week, right? You gotta pay for that somehow.
Lines of coke? Are you talking about?
No.
Yeah. Did you have some fun side job?
No. Most of my that was the other problem. I was a couple of plays I did that I really enjoyed. I did Glengarry Glen Ross, where I was Shelley the Machine Levine, and Jack Lemmon in the movie steals my bit where he does the delayed finger. I did that first. I came up with that. Anyways, I don't think he saw a performance. No, most of them were really horrible. I mean, I'd be sent out. The agents I had were all non-union, so they'd send me 150 miles to go audition for the part of a doctor, and I'm sitting in this waiting room with about 6 other old guys. They all looked like Marcus Welby. They all were in their 60s, and here I was like 28. And I go, what am I doing here? They all look like old doctors, and say, you can pass, you can do it. No, I can't. So anyways, I started waiting tables. That got me into bartending. Was making really good money. And I used to hate,
Chicago?
Yeah. I used to hate taking weekends off to do theater jobs that weren't.
Because you wouldn't make as much.
Yeah.
I wouldn't make anything. Mostly, you might. The best you do is maybe get $150 for the run, maybe $150 a week. But I was making $150 easily a night bartending. But that led into, back then. This is the thing is that in the early '90s, when I was started bartending, there were no brand ambassadors. There was nobody teaching you about whiskey. It was very common back then to think of Southern Comfort as a whiskey. Someone asked for, I'd like a whiskey. How about that Southern Comfort? Sure. I don't know any better. There you go.
Yeah, I was tended bar in the late 80s, and the only thing nobody ever taught me anything. I went out and there wasn't even that much to read. You couldn't even educate yourself.
I mean, you could go out to bookstores, but you wouldn't even know what to look for. Other than the Boston bartender
the cocktail books. That was about it.
That's about it.
Start to change. Like, when did education become
It was the 90s.
It was the 90s, and it was guys like Evan Katnack started coming in about 90. He retired in 93, but he had been coming over, and him and some of the other retired DIAGEO brand ambassadors, former retired distillers started coming over. Gordon Bell was another one. They come over and they do not staff trainings. That was just it. They would come out do consumer events like whiskey dinners. Then it was help me, Lou, with Glenmorangie. And was it Andrew?
Burnett, Anthony Burnett.
Anthony Burnett. So Anthony
Yeah.
Burnett was my first staff training on whiskey. And by that was about 96, 97.
Just a little note. He was the first whiskey person I ever heard say, we make it to drink. And I've heard it so many times since about collectors and, and all this stuff about how precious it gets. Anthony was the first guy I ever heard say, we make it to drink.
Yeah.
I have a follow-up question with that, but maybe I'll save it until you finish, Marty.
See, she probably won't have a problem remembering it. We would have to ask it right away. Or it'd be just...
Well, I'm always taking mental notes.
I'll bet you are.
Yeah. Anyways, I found there was a gig, and I think my little sister told me about it, and we both went out for it. Johnny Walker was looking for people to run around in kilts, and I use the term kilt lightly. He was a plaid dish rag.
Pics didn't happen.
Sounds more like a loincloth.
Yeah, it really was. I mean, especially on me, it wasn't they were fit to size. Okay, so they were like, I felt a little like Tarzan. So I go in, you run into a bar, there'd be about 4 of us, you buy people drinks and tell them real quick about Johnny Walker Red and lemonade, ginger ale, and you buy them a cocktail, get them drinking whiskey. But eventually it really, really worked. I did that part-time for about 7 years, and then I started working for other whiskey brands too. And then after 7 years, they're looking for people to take over for those older Scottish guys. They wanted someone permanently here because those guys were still, Evan and everyone else were still traipsing back and forth over the ocean. Yeah. So they wanted young people. But by this time, I think I was nearly 40. So, I mean, young, I'm youthful, people, but the rest of them were, mostly in their 30s, and they hired 7 of us to be well, actually, first they had a group of us. I think there was 11 originally as Scotch ambassadors, and we started doing those big Johnny Walker mentor events, 150 people at a time.
Oh, I remember those
per night, and those things. You got to remember, Johnny Walker was second to Chivas in the U.S. prior to those events. I mean, they did a great job of just leaving Chivas in its dust.
Yeah, they haven't been second to Chivas in a long time.
Yeah, and Chivas even tried to start doing the same thing. I attended a few, and they weren't the same. Now,
was this DIAGEO at the time, or
so? When I started, all it was about 96, and that was Shefflin Somerset. So Diageo wasn't quite even around yet. So UDV and Guinness had merged, or no, wait, did they merge? What was that? Grand Met and UDV / Guinness finally merged. Then a few years later, they buy up Seagram's.
And Dunkin' Donuts was in that too, right? Wasn't Dunkin' Donuts part of that?
I don't know if Dunkin' Donuts was. I know that it was a big. What was the Burger? Yeah, Burger King.
Burger
King Burger King was part of that.
Yeah,
and they sold off all the food. Yeah, Burger King. Thanks.
Right.
So they sold all that off, and they really started focusing in on the whiskeys. And then they moved Shefflin, I guess, Diageo, and what is now Moet Hennessy. They kind of parted ways, but not. Diageo still owns a third or 33% of Moet Hennessy. But
I didn't know that.
So I used to do Tanqueray promotions, and we back in the day we had not only Johnny Walker but Dewar's as well. So doing all those different whiskeys, the classic malts, and eventually they got Bullet from Seagram's. That became part of it. Then we bought up Bushmills. Then we went from being Scotch ambassadors and then Masters of Scotch the masters of whiskey. And then about
The
2000,
Sean Connery accent there.
when they wanted me to go replace Evan Katnack, a guy who distilled at 13 different distilleries, an old Highlander, always wore his kilt. I ran into him on a plane in his kilt. That guy wore his kilt to bed.
And his knees looked like it.
Yes.
Yes.
He had stylish little legs for but so I would go and do these events, and I'm an Irish boy from the southwest side of Chicago, and they're making me wear this kilt. It was a beautiful kilt, but I felt really out of place replacing Evan and going up in front of these people, and they're expecting this Scottish guy. So I go and do my hello everyone, welcome. I'm Martin Duffy. I hope you're all doing well. If the accent is bothering you at all, don't worry, it's bogus. I'm actually from the southwest side of Chicago. And that's how I start all my events. And so anyway, that led to 2 years over in Ireland, where I got a call. Gregor Katnack had told a guy from Ireland about on a golf trip to Scotland. They were looking for an American to come over and talk about spirits. And so I said, shit, yeah. Go live over in Ireland, my homeland, my ancestral homeland. So I said, yeah, let's go. And I did, and it was great. I loved it. Got a chance to explore Europe, came back, spent another year. When I came back, everything was very corporate. I did get the title Senior Master of Whiskey because everyone else had died. So it was a laugh. It was like Highlander. Yeah, kill the other masters of whiskey. So then eventually, but then, I got tired of the corporate. I was getting phone calls bitching about shit that was beyond my control. I was like, are you fucking kidding me? Screw it. I'm
Apparently they weren't.
No, and I also quit thinking, hey man, I just spent 2 years over in Europe. I'm a hot piece of property here. If I'm gonna get a job, I'm gonna be scooped up in a minute. Yeah.
No.
8-9 months later. Hey, do you guys have a job?
So Marty, you had a lot of interface with consumers, right?
Oodles.
How?
That was the whole job. Yeah.
Yeah. What were the type of questions that were from then versus now?
Well,
it's what were people interested in back then?
Oh, well, back then it was everything. No one understood it. That's why I always broke it down in the simplest form. I go, look, do you drink beer? Here's this. This is distilled beer, basically. Take out the hops. And if you like beer, you're drinking watered down whiskey. If you like light beer, you like crap. That's what I tell them. And then, but they would ask just about everything. The big question was, what's the difference between Scotch and whiskey? What's the difference between bourbon and whiskey? Always the same thing. I go, you weren't listening for the last 45 minutes, have you? I said whiskey was the general umbrella title.
Where do you think that came from, though? Because I think all three of us. Go ahead, Lou.
Whisky Advocate and Whiskey Fest was a lot of it.
Okay.
I know a lot of the distillers blame us for that. And I say blame because I was talking to Richard Patterson about it one time, not too long ago, maybe 6-7 years ago. And he's like, it used to be an easy job. And then you guys came along with your Whiskey Fest. And he said, within 5 years, they're asking me questions I never even thought about.
Okay.
Well, but it's also very regional. If you go to Ireland, when I was in Ireland, I'm doing these whiskey tastings, and I might have a Scotch in there if I was doing World of Whiskey, and people would say, "Hey, what's the difference between a Scotch and whiskey?" And what they meant was Irish whiskey.
Irish, yeah.
Here in the U.S., people think of bourbon, or that was
what's the difference between bourbon and whiskey? I've heard that a lot. Yeah.
Well, that was just it. I mean, the education of just American whiskeys was a job unto its own that we weren't really tackling because we didn't focus on Bullet as much. Even when we
Mm.
did bring it in, it was still a minor brand. It didn't really explode until a few years later. And Dickel was nearly non-existent.
Yeah.
Dickel was a favorite of the masters of whiskey, but DIAGEO, the mothership, really didn't give them much love. Which was funny. If you went down to Dickel, they loved the fact that they were kind of off the radar.
Right.
The headquarters wouldn't come down very often. They couldn't find the place, and
No cell signal.
they could go do stuff on their own. But
Right.
nowadays, we've talked about this. I think Lew and I have had chats about this quite a bit. We were going to go and do a class at New Orleans Bourbon Festival about dispelling a few myths.
Oh, right. We were going to do a myth class.
Yeah, but it's nowadays, I think with all the books that are out there now, as opposed to 20 years ago, all the books, all the websites, all the whiskey podcasts, all the stuff on YouTube. I mean, there's some misinformation, but not a lot. At least not as much as there used to be. And I think
now there's just a lot of hot takes on everything that need to be smacked. That's all.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of. I mean, I think the worst thing today. You had some of it back then. You always had somebody who wanted to. I had one guy try to convince me Lagavulin was pronounced Lagavulin. He goes, "No, it's Lagavulin. I had in San Francisco." Okay, I was at the distillery. They would laugh at you if you pronounced it that way.
Unless you were buying whiskey.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, yeah. Oh, we got lots of that Lagavulin. If you want it, yeah, go ahead.
That was one of my big. I worked beer retail for about 4 months in I want to say 94, I think, because the company I was working for fell apart, and I was looking for it too. And so I sold beer retail for about 4 months, and that was one of my first lessons. This woman said, "Do you have Schnapple?" I'm like, Yeah, sure. We have Schnapple right over here. And
Schnapple?
We kept saying Schnapple, and I brought the case over, and I'm ringing it up for her, and she looks down at the box, and she looks up and says, "Hey, you're saying it wrong. There's no H in this." And I'm like, "Well, look at that. You're right. It's Snapple." Who knew? And that was my intro to retail.
Snapple schnapps.
Apple. That's apple schnapps, but you do pronounce it
After you've had a few.
Just put them together.
Yeah.
Schnapple, schnaps.
So how did Glencairn scoop you up? I don't even want to ask about Benedictine. I don't want to know. We'll just draw a curtain over that whole thing. Here, just like that. Okay.
Benedictine was just an inflatable raft that was going by my sinking ship. I jumped into it.
That's one of the best images I've ever heard. I love that.
What was it? Oh, so I met the Davidson boys and Ray. I remember it was Raymond, Scott, and his beautiful wife, Aileen. Aileen. That they came to Whiskey Fest. I think it was Whiskey Fest Chicago about 2001 when the glass was first going off. Mm-hmm. And I think they knew Gregor, and I was with Gregor Katnick, and it was great. We ended up hanging out, and then I think Ray said, "Oh, if you ever over in Scotland, look me up." And I did. I looked him up, and I stayed at his condo in Glasgow, and we hung out. And then I go over and hang out with Scott, and then Andy, and when they came over, I always looked after them, took them around. So about 7 years ago, this past month, Andy calls me up, says, "Would you like to meet up for dinner? I'm going to be in Chicago." And he just asked, "Would you like to come work for us? Be our North American?"
Wow.
Andy was getting married, and he had been their guy traveling the globe. And so he was a little
needed to rein that in a bit.
So he figured, you could take care of North America. I said, "Oh, sweet." And it was really a handshake. That was it. Nice. And it's been that way ever since. And they're, I love those guys. They're all of them. They're the Swedish bunch, not the Swedish bunch, the sweetest bunch of folks to work for. They really are. They're very accommodating, very sweet, and they take care of me in my old age. I'm hoping that they'll encase me in a crystal coffin when the time comes.
Doesn't sound very durable.
I'll be like Sleeping Beauty. Wasn't she in a crystal coffin and glass?
You're right. It is Sleeping Beauty. I was thinking of Snow White.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my story. Sad but true. Now, Lewis, what about you?
We should move on to Lew.
Now, is it true that you played Gimli the dwarf in the Lord of the Rings films? That was what I always heard.
No, I was already gray by then.
You're Gandalf the Grey?
That's it. That's it.
Wow, such a great British accent. I never expected.
Turn it on off like a switch.
Now, we've heard bits and pieces of your life, but I mean, because you were a librarian.
I was.
But how did that? First off, were you a big beer drinker as a young man? Because
yes.
Beer. Let's get it out there right now. Beer is your first love.
Yeah.
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 So were you like in high school?
No, actually, I didn't have. I really didn't have a.
Crazy?
Well, that's not quite true. My dad was giving me little bits of beer from an early age, but that's just a Pennsylvania thing. The first, full glass of beer I ever had freshman year in college. I was already 19 by then, so. But I drank some. I did drink some in Maryland, which was still 18 at the time. So we'd go down across the border, and there was this little town across the border called Conowingo, right beside the Susquehanna River, and there was this blockhouse bar there. I wish I could remember the name, because we could go there and get served legally and not have to worry about it. And every Saturday night they had this house band. The band sucked, but the pedal steel player was really, really good. And we'd just go down there to hear him and drink. And that was my thing. And I was just drinking crap. And then my senior year at college, it was 1981, Holy Thursday. I just happen to remember that. Our medieval history prof took two of us out to a local bar, an old German place, the Lausus Hotel in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. We went to Franklin and Marshall College, and the guy he had this big cooler full of beers. He had 125 beers in 1981, which was, it was one of the largest collections in the country at the time. And you would go over and get a beer and bring it back, and he would charge you. He would open the beer, and this old German guy would give you like a little capsule description of the beer, or have some kind of just like a one-liner. I still remember that after I was drinking more stuff, I got a what the hell is Kronenborg, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I come over and I put it on the bar, and he picks it up and says, "Alsatian beer really belongs to us." I'm like, shut up! Shut up! So I went over and got a Stroh's, because that's what I drank, and I brought it over, and the German guy didn't even get it. My history prof grabs the beer out of my hand and says, "We're not drinking that tonight." And he went over to the bar and he got me an Altmünster. I still have the bottle.
Oh, wow.
It's one of the few things I've kept. And it was an Altmünster. It was a German Pilsner, and it's like somebody flipped on a switch. And I still drank other stuff. I still drink Jenny Cream. But that's what really changed, and that set me down the path to what I do today.
Stroh spelled backwards is shorts. We used to always ask for shorts.
I like that. I never knew that.
Yeah.
But I guess I always knew that.
In Michigan, no?
Huh?
Detroit.
Yeah.
Is it?
Yep.
It was. Yeah. Now they're in real estate.
last week just real quick, last week in Louisville, we went to Meta, wonderful cocktail bar folks, here down in Louisville. But we had a beer and a shot, and the beer was Old Style, which is the beer that makes Chicago famous.
Yeah.
And that was the first beer I ever had. My dad used to I'd bring out a little juice glass. Pops was sitting on the front porch, and he'd pour a little of that. And one little juice glass was enough to knock me out. I'd fall asleep on the step on the porch, and sometimes he'd leave me there. I'd wake up at 3 a.m. on the porch. I think he wanted.
We would drink. I would get little bits of Duke Ale from the Duquesne Brewery in Pittsburgh.
Duke Ale. I love that.
Ale.
That sounds like my stage name. Oh, that's going to be my next stage.
Wait, it gets better. The label, Duke Ale, the Prince of Pilsners.
Wow.
Which makes no sense in about 3 different directions, but.
Well, isn't it though? Because the Duke of Wales, isn't he the Duke of Wales?
Prince of
Charles?
Wales.
Oh, he's the Prince of Wales. You're right.
He's the Prince of Wales.
But he's the Duke of something else.
Probably.
He has a bunch of different titles. So how'd you get involved? I think we brushed upon this in the past, but how'd you get involved with what was then Malt Advocate?
I got more and more interested in beer. I started keeping notes on it. I started reading everything I could find, which was mostly Michael Jackson, but there was other stuff out there. I started writing a newsletter for my the little startup pharmaceutical company I was working for, because there are always home brewers in the chemistry department. I don't care where you go, there's always a chemist who is home brewing, right? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. So it was like me and 6 chemists, and I forget who the other person was. An immunologist. So that was the mailing list, and I was writing like a thing every week. I'd be writing like something new about like how brewing worked and how this was and that. And the one chemist, his local beer store started putting out a newsletter. And one day he brings me a copy and lays it on my desk. He says, "This is a great idea, but it's crap. You can do better than this. You said you do better than this." I'm like, I looked at him, I'm like, yeah, I could. And so I ran up a 2-sided thing on some really primitive desktop publishing software, which back when desktop publishing was still a phrase. And I took it to the beer store and I said, I got your newsletter. I said, I'd really like to do this for you. You can have this one for free. If you like it, I can do more for you and we can talk about money. And the guy paid me $25 for it. And that first issue, somebody who lived in the area knew John Hansel and took it up to him.
Oh, wow. Really?
And said, this guy should be writing for you. And I think John got in touch with me like 2 or 3 months later and had me write a piece on ice beer. Do you remember ice beer?
Oh, wow.
That was way back there. And that was in 94, which was right about when, all in the space of about 4 weeks, my father-in-law was diagnosed with cancer, my daughter was born, and the company fell apart that I was working for. So that all happened just like that. And I started trying to write more because I enjoyed it. And I thought, wow, $25. And then a friend of ours actually got me a temp job at another pharmaceutical company. I was editing labels, drug labels in Spanish and Portuguese, neither of which I speak. And by the time that ran out in about 17 months, I was writing enough and selling enough that my wife said, I know you're not making anything right now, but I think you ought to go for this. So God bless her. Yeah, she supported me through it. And I mean, things picked up within a year. I still remember that night we actually were able to afford a takeout pizza, which that was a big night. That was a rough year. But after that, things got better, mainly because she started making more money. But my wife has done very well. She works in pharmaceuticals. She's a clinical research associate director. Well, no, you're retired now, aren't you? Yeah, she just retired 2 weeks ago. Yeah.
Congrats.
So, so I mean, she supported me, and then in '96 when craft beer started flatlining, Hansel made a really wise decision and took the magazine to whiskey because we'd already had a couple things in there. He really liked whiskey. He had been to Scotland a number of times, visited distilleries when you didn't do that, just kind of talked his way in. And so we started writing about it, and, we started getting advertising immediately because these guys were so excited about the idea of a magazine that was just about whiskey. Of course, it wasn't at that time. It was about beer and whiskey, but that didn't last long. Because nobody in the brewing industry and the craft brewing industry had any money to buy ads, except, God bless him, Jim Cook. We had a Sam Adams ad regularly for years and years.
That's right. And their Millennium beer was always at Whiskey Fest.
Yes.
Right?
Millennium and then Utopias. Yeah.
Yeah. I always wondered
Anchor was always at Whiskey Fest. Same reason.
Yeah, but Anchor made sense to me only because eventually Fritz made.
Oh, the distilling. Yeah, that's true. Unibrew was always there too.
So what did you? I mean, you know what? I always thought of you and John Hansel as kind of the Simon and Garfunkel of whiskey writing.
Love Simon and Garfunkel.
Little John. Simon and Garfunkel?
Love Simon and Garfunkel.
Oh my God, something prior to 2010. I mean, there's John, here's Lew.
It's true.
You guys would stand next to each other. Yeah, there weren't a lot of whiskey writers. I know eventually, I know that Michael Jackson was around, but
sure,
I didn't really know Michael Jackson until the early aughts, and even then I kept on confusing him for the beloved Michael Jackson.
I mean, I was editing him, which was just still blows my mind.
And he was a beer guy.
He was both, although he was better known in the UK as a whiskey guy.
Oh, that's interesting.
And more so as a beer guy here. Because there was apparently a thing at his memorial service in London where Jim Murray was scurrying to pick up his mantle, apparently, and be the whiskey writer.
So
that's what I've been told. I wasn't there.
I kind of wanted, if it's okay, if it makes sense, I kind of wanted to skip ahead a bit and ask you a very pointed question. So last week, right, Marty mentioned we had some time at ADI. I also spent some time in the beer world, right? So judge for GABF last week. And it's funny having that juxtaposition. And I wanted your take, right, on kind of the parallels that have happened over the years with beer and specifically craft beer and the whiskey space and the distilling space.
This is something I've thought about a lot. And I mean, I think it adds to my writing because I've got, I've seen that. I see a lot of parallels, except the timeline's compressed.
Right. Yeah.
Because everybody's already seen it happen. Beer got a lot of pushback from retailers, from wholesalers, from on-premise. Because I still remember clearly in 1992 going into a bar in just across the river in New Jersey and asking for, do you have this? Do you have this? Do you have this? They're like, no, we don't have any of that shit. It doesn't sell. And I remember even then thinking, well, no, it can't if you don't have it.
Yeah.
And that was, that was the thing that kept, and equipment. You couldn't buy equipment. You couldn't buy malt in the sizes that you needed to be getting. You had to buy like a freaking railroad car of malt, or else buy the 50-pound sack at a homebrew store. And of course, once you'd seen that happen, once as a wholesaler or retailer, you'd seen that. When craft distilling came around, you're like, yeah, bring it in. I'll take all of them. Go ahead. All the brands, bring them over. Yeah, things moved a lot faster. And they were also, it took it took Vendome some time to start making smaller setups, but not that much compared to how long it took to start making. Yeah, I mean, because a lot of brewing. I mean, I remember. What's her name in Leominster, Massachusetts? Shit, I can't think of the name of the brewery now. But I mean, they used to. Their mash tun was a shrimp boiler. That's what they used. You know, Hair of the Dog out in Portland, they used a big kettle they got from Campbell's Soup. You know, it was all repurposed shit. Mueller makes dairy equipment, stainless steel dairy equipment.
See a lot of dairy.
Yeah, there's a lot of dairy equipment in it, and the Grundy tanks that they made in the UK. Good God, I think there's still some of those floating around. They were just everybody used. They were like currency because stainless never wears out. You know, you maintain it. You know, I remember a brewery in Richmond that was using old AB yeast propagation tanks as their primary fermenters because you know AB goes through a lot of yeast, but.
You ever go to these distilleries that have they're using beer kegs to distill? And I am always scared shitless of those because I'm just thinking, wait a minute, can't that explode?
Yeah.
Can I?
Yeah. Well, and a couple of them have.
I'll just take a quick moment to PSA and say make sure you always have the proper equipment.
Absolutely.
PRVs, pressure relief valves, super important. I'm just going to leave that there.
We are not.
Yeah, I mean, you know, people think about that with distilling, and distilling is more dangerous than brewing. But I mean, I know of people who were killed in brewing by poorly maintained equipment and lack of training. You know, you don't know how to do this stuff, and you got to stay on it, and that kind of worries me when I see because that kind of stuff happened when brewing expanded so rapidly, and it worries me a little bit about distilling expanding so rapidly.
And do you think that journalism or the media plays a role in that, in education?
I think we should, yeah.
Well,
but I mean, you know, specifically, I think the industry publications should be talking about it all the time, and a lot of them do.
And for sure, I know I've written on safety for sure for craft distilling. I know a number of folks have. So,
well, you know, I'm always thinking about new columns for ACSA, so I'll do one next time.
Okay, fabulous.
Yeah.
Boom.
No problem. Yeah, done.
You know, it's funny what you said too about how you go in and. Yeah, we don't sell. No one asks for that shit. We don't sell that, because you don't have it. As part of the master whiskey thing, I used to have to go in with sales reps, and people say, "Oh, no one asks for these. No one asks for single malt sketches." And go, "Well, that's because you have none on your back bar. If I came
They're
in,
not stupid.
I wouldn't ask for one because why would I ask you for one? You don't
Do you have any live chickens?
Yeah, right. That's what I said. Yeah, so but it was funny seeing how the industry changed, and because of I think again, a lot of whiskey writers, all the media, all the attention brought to whiskey. Next thing you know, you're coming in, and there's everybody and their dog. Especially like here in Chicago, you went from having Delilah's and Duke of Perth in the '90s to that everybody wanted to have the biggest whiskey selection ever. And they wouldn't even want to. Yeah, they might go through the motions of tasting out the whiskey, but they say, "Well, we'll take it." How many expressions of that do you got? Oh, we'll take them all. And to the point where you had back bars that were jammed with bottles of whiskey that Angel's Envy and Knob Creek, was being.
You're looking at the side of it,
which was the version of going back to the brewing. Everybody got into
the tap handles.
Yeah. So there's a limited number of tap handles, and you got the seasonal tap handles. So even if you did get your beer on tap, now you were only there for 3 months. And then And then I started seeing, you started to hear about breweries, and because there were so many of them competing, someone like New Glarus who said, screw it, we're going to become a destination place. You want our beer? You come to us, which was great. And I've seen smart distilleries that just didn't have the wherewithal. They didn't have the money for the marketing. Or some who just said, you know what, I've tried it and it's just so hard to,
You got to have somebody there.
Yeah. And that costs money. That costs big money to get someone good.
Yeah.
It's tough. You got to pay at least.
See, that was one of the things that it took me a while to realize. But once I did, I started preaching it to producers. Sorry to say it, Liz, but you need to pay your salespeople as at least as well as you pay your production staff.
Oh yeah,
because the production staff could be making awesome shit, but if nobody knows about it,
it's a team, right? Like I think that's really important,
and nobody should be slighted.
Yeah, but a sales guy, and what I always recommend to a distiller is don't hire a brand ambassador. I was one. I was exceptional, but most nowadays they think it's all. And for the big brands, you talk to them, they don't do half the shit I was required to do. They weren't given a lot of KPIs as far as go see 60 accounts in a month, go do at least 9 staff trainings a month. They're not given that. Some of them are strictly consumer focused, and that's it.
Oh,
and anything beyond that, they think is so they're a little too high and mighty. I always say you got to get somebody who's going to be a brand manager or a market manager, somebody you can hire one person who will cover 4 states, and
well, this actually gets into one of the questions I had for both of you.
Yeah.
Okay. You both see a fair number of distilleries. Marty, I know you set a hard pace to follow whenever we're visiting. It's like 5 or 6 distilleries a day, and I just can't sip that much. But because I feel obligated to,
I do too.
Well, there you are. And Liz, you're jetting all over the damn world going to distilleries. Mm-hmm. So suggestions from both of you to new distillers and to, I don't know what, established but growing distilleries. What's some good things to do in your area? What's some things you really either should avoid or not spend as much time on? Go ahead, Liz. Sorry, first? Marty, you want to jump in?
No, Liz, do you want to go first? Ladies first.
You kick it off. I'll join in.
All right. Well, it's funny because this topic came up last week at ADI. You have a lot of ADI usually gets a lot of folks who are in R&D.
Tire kickers.
They're all, exactly. And you hear their ideas and you go, okay, but I'm going to just do it out on my farm in the middle of nowhere. That's it. That's the way to do it, and people will come. And I go, no, it's that field of dreams, buddy. That's not how it works. You got to, a real good example. I use a couple of different distilleries as examples of the right things to do. Location, like any other business, is pretty important. Even if you're a great, well-known distiller, you're doing a lot of marketing, you got to be near, you got to be able to travel to it pretty easily. Blum Brothers in Galena, Illinois. Now, Galena was getting 1.5 million tourists a year. Now, that's a good spot. They got their distillery in Old Mormon Church that they took over on the outskirts. And now they're the number 1 tourist attraction in that town. That was smart. Do they have a big center, a big visitor center where they can do private events? Yes. Do they have outdoor fields where they can do secret events?
High West comes to mind. Big tourist area, the ski resorts. And yet, at the same time, you're like Koval. You're right in the middle of a huge number of people.
But what Koval doesn't have, that they should, is they don't have event space. Just like a bar. At one point I was thinking of opening up a bar, and one of the things I wanted was a room for event space, because those on the lean times, event spaces can generate a lot of money. A lot of distilleries that don't have wide distribution, if you have event space or you have a bar, and you see a lot of this down in Louisville, or not in Louisville, in Kentucky. Jeff the Creed, big event space. They have a whole restaurant. The new Log Still down in New Haven, Kentucky. They have a freaking, amphitheater.
Wow.
And they're building a train station because there's a little train that comes in. So, I mean, little stuff. Of course, a lot of that.
That's Colonel Taylor. He built a railroad line up to the castle.
Well, and a lot of that takes money, but I've seen a lot of other folks who've done stuff that's just smart. It's just so smart because you want to be
I ran into like 3 or 4 craft distillers in a year or two. This was back about 10 years ago, who told me, I'm not making this up, Lincoln Henderson had come by, had just dropped in. And at the one place, he's like, this looks like hell. You need to clean up around here. Nobody's going to want to come back. And the next place, he's like, why aren't you serving drinks? It's legal in your state. I know. I looked it up. And then it's something. He's like, why don't you have any merchandise? You need to sell merchandise. What are you crazy? You're leaving money on the table. And he was, he's absolutely right. And I can't, why aren't you doing that stuff? Because getting back to what you were asking, Liz, all the breweries do it.
Yeah.
Right?
It's smart. It's the thing to do. We had there was a ACSA or ADI one year in Pittsburgh. There was a woman who owned a distillery who, the Licorice Boys down at Iron Root had, they're kind of talking up the Glencairn glass branded, but they're also just talking up a branded merchandise and how you can make a lot of money selling that. But then this other woman who owned a distillery said, nah, don't waste any money on that, because that's money that could be going to selling your whiskey and stuff like that. And I go, yeah, but if I come in and I want to support you, but I don't want to pay $60 for a bottle of your whiskey, but I will pay $20 for a t-shirt.
Which also turns you into a brand ambassador.
And a walking billboard.
Yeah.
I mean, it's marketing. You got to also market. And if you can't afford that one person, 80,000, go ahead.
I was just going to use that as a segue back to the question I was saving.
Oh, right. Wow. I had forgotten that.
Packaging versus the actual thing you're going to drink, right? So what's the trade-off? And from both of your perspectives, like how important is one over the other?
Well, I'll go back to, I remember this was actually the very first interview I ever did as a writer.
Okay.
I got Steve Hindy at Brooklyn Brewing, one of the founders of Brooklyn Brewery. He walked around Brooklyn for an hour with me and we just talked and I taped it. And one of the things he said was, and they famously went and got their logo done by Milton Glaser. And I don't know how they managed the guy who designed I Heart New York.
Oh, wow.
Massive guy in graphic design. And I think they actually gave him a percentage, a small one, but a percentage, which had to have paid off because they were very successful. But he did the Brooklyn logo because, and they were a pair of journalists. Or no, he was a journalist. Tom Potter was a banker. And they're like, we have to sell the first case because it doesn't matter how good the beer is. How good the beer is sells the second case. Mm-hmm. The first case, you got to sell it on the package. There's no other reason to, because especially back then, because a lot of places, most places, sampling wasn't legal. So you gotta, and that sells on back bars a lot. Oh, what's that bottle? That kind of shit. I think it's really important for that first sale. But if you don't have it in the bottle,
it
ain't gonna
help. Not going to say that, as you say, Lou, they're not going to buy the second bottle,
right?
Based on the bottle, really important. Yeah.
Think about it. Some packaging has lasted decades, even a century. I always point to You know, you walk into some of these craft distilleries and you'll see that they'll have a number of different SKUs, number of different bottles, different labels. And you go, this isn't a brand. You don't have a brand here. You know, and a distributor, that's the other thing a distributor is going to ask for. They want it uniform. They want
the billboard effect.
Johnny
Walker.
Yeah. Look, I always point to Johnny Walker. It's 100, more than 100 years old that you've had a same square bottle, slanted label. They can change the color of the label. That's always Johnny Walker. Always has a little striding man. Few whiskeys and spirits. Same label. Even if he changes it up, puts flaming lips on there or something, it still says few in the same lettering, same square bottle. And that's the other key thing I point out to folks. I went out with Wes Henderson that one time when he first launched Angel's Envy, and he was so proud of that bottle. He loved that bottle, but we went to his bar downtown, and he couldn't find it. He's looking at tons of whiskey, and it was sideways. Yeah, and that was before he goes, I got to put the name on the side, don't I? Yeah, it's really a shame. But that's why I tell people, get a nice square round bottle. They changed the Deutsch family changed Dave Schmear's Redemption from that circular lighthouse bottle to a bottle that looks like either actually they got sued by DIAGEO because DIAGEO was claiming it looked like Bullet. It I didn't think it looked that much like Bullet, but I could see some similarities, but not enough to sue anyone.
Liz brings up that we're getting close to the end here, but we do have one question hanging, from an old buddy of mine, Jeff Wells in DC. Jeff, really glad to hear that you are doing better. Jeff is recovering from COVID, vaccinated, but people get it. Anyway, very glad to hear you're doing better. He asks, are there any other federal regulations being discussed with labeling and designations with the TTB? I'm not sure of where things stand right now. Liz, do you have anything on that? I know there's a lot of stuff up in the air.
It's a good question. I know Donald is on the session today. Hey, Donald. He would actually be a better person to ask in terms of regs. Yes, I don't know if I necessarily have anything to add. I don't know if Donald's
twinkling his toes in the sand down in Florida. I think there's loads. I mean, there's been a number of different things that have been up for consideration over the last couple of years, but I don't know if there's been any movement.
I don't know if anything has actually been decided. I don't even think they've decided whether they're going to allow you to. I don't know. The spelling of whiskey, I know, was one of the things that we had in there.
The spelling. I think
yes.
The spelling.
Yeah, because there's so many nerds that want to know the difference between whiskey with an E and without. Ask a Canadian the difference between a neighbor and a neighbor. It's spelling. A. The heck was that? I don't know. Liz?
Is that you, Liz? Liz presses that every time she swears.
So, I guess on that note, should we wrap up and tee up?
Yeah, who's next?
Yeah, we can wrap up. You don't know? Why?
I'm really excited. So next week, I actually won't be here, but you'll be in the great company of Marty and Lew as they host CDC, Chicago Distilling Company owners, Jay and Noel. Really great people. Super disappointed that I won't be able to make it. I'll be...
Is this the vacation, Liz?
Yeah, I'll be in Hawaii. Finally,
God bless you.
Oh, that's right. You're in Hawaii.
Yeah.
But
you wear a bandana on your head so it'll feel like Liz is here?
I could do that. I can do that, but I can't make my hair that long that fast. Can't do it.
Some folic acid, it'll be fine. Guys, it's been exciting. We haven't spent much time interviewing each other and asking each other questions, so really appreciate that. But again, everyone come back next week. Jay and Noel, super fun people.
Yeah, back to normal next week.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks, guys.
See you next week. Bye-bye. Have fun, Liz.
Thanks.